Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Many African countries are using the Chinese yuan for trade with China, deepening China's economic influence on the continent. Should Africa rely less on the US dollar? Ivory Coast has announced a new oil discovery that can boost its economy, attract investment, and create jobs. Can oil well truly benefit ordinary citizens? Nigeria's Senate has voted for state policing following a bill sent by President Bola Tinubu. Will state-controlled police improve security or be politically abused in the country? Joining us for further insights is Samuel Atiku. Welcome, Samuel, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Let's start with our first story, where we're seeing more African countries are using the Chinese yuan for trade with China. This seems to be deepening China's influence on the African continent. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is a great improvement where we're moving from reliance on the US dollar to the Chinese yuan? Or do you think Africa needs to also take that bold step in ensuring that we have, there's been plans of having a single currency as well as part of like the AFTA agreements as well. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think Africa needs to step away from using foreign currency and try to create our own unified currency? And do you think more countries are going to also adopt using the Chinese yuan when they have trade with China? Is it a good thing or it's a bad thing for us?
I think we just need to lay the context clearly. I believe that currencies that you're using should ideally reflect your trading relationship. So if Nigeria have a strong relationship, for instance, with South Africa, why do we have to go through a third party to consummate trade between ourselves? I think so. There's always a strong commercial case, whether we like it or not. In recent times, when it comes to the yuan, there's a strong commercial case. And the way you think about this is to think about, if you look closely at the trade between China and Africa, it's approaching almost $348 billion. $348 billion when you look at the direct trade in goods between Africa and China. That's just not where it all ends. Now, when you look at the US and then you look at Africa, our trade is just 83 billion. And it tells you a whole lot of story that our trade with China, Africa's trade with China is massive compared to our trade with the US, Africa's trade with the US. So the question is, why do you have to trade with China? If Nigeria, for instance, want to sell crude to China, why do you have to sell it in petrodollars? So that you get dollars and then you still take the dollars back to China to buy anything you want to buy from China. It doesn't make sense. You're only paying administrative fee to the US, and that makes US, I would say that's what the US have enjoyed over the couple of years after the Second World War. So my take here is that once you see South Africa doing, I think that makes a lot of economic sense in terms of scale, in terms of many things. If you look, I'm talking about Africa, China. If you look closely at South Africa's trade with China in 2025, last year, was roughly about 53.6 billion US dollars. But when you look at the US government's trade, the US states, right? United States trade with South Africa is 22. So China's trade is more than twice in terms of size. Why again do you have to consummate trade through the US dollars. So my take here is one, currency use should ideally reflect actual trading relationship. If we can get that right, I think that helps us also. The second aspect that nobody seems to be talking about is the diversification. And we saw what happened, what the US has done around their trade. You have this this stability that comes with it. I mean, as a government, you cannot allow the ego of someone to override your own economic importance. And that explains why the world must begin to diversify how you do trade. You cannot rely on the US financial system to consummate trade. You have to begin to look at other systems, the European system. You begin to look at the Chinese system, and maybe the Russian system, or maybe the Euro-Russia system, or the Eurasia system. And then you begin to look for other ways to facilitate trade. So the second point I will make is that in terms of our diversification, I think it's important for Africa, and especially for countries within Africa, to begin to diversify away from that one dominant currency construct to facilitate trade. I think that's the second point I will make. Regardless of that, we need to look at the role of the yuan itself in settlements. Whether we like it or not, the yuan and then the economy of China has come to scale, right? The direct yuan settlement, of course, one way or the other, reduce costs. If you are if you are facilitating trade, just like I explained earlier, before I want to export crude oil. I mean, let me explain that in simple layman's terms. I want to sell my one big tanker of crude oil. I will first tell China, go and buy dollars. So China will go and buy dollars. They will pay a fee. They will now pay me through a US system. They will pay a fee. Now I get the money. And I want to buy things from China. Maybe I need I need tractors and all those things to import into my country, right? I will still take the US dollar, right? And then I will begin to issue ILO. Again, the fees are all there. So you're typically paying the US financial system a fee to facilitate a trade that you can just do simply with China. So yuan, whether we like it or not, is coming to play a role in terms of settlement, and it comes at a reduced cost. We need to begin to look at that so that we begin to, instead of paying excessively, we take in some money. So that I don't over talk about this, so that it doesn't look as if I'm sounding more like a Chinese now. I think why they are greater concern, there are concerns, of course, around the imbalance trade between China and Africa. We can look at the domineering role of China in Africa, ABCD. You can go into those, so that I don't deviate away from the question you've asked. I think it's very simple and straightforward. One, Africa's long-term objective should be the African currency, where we can use that to actually facilitate trade among ourselves and then also facilitate trade with our partners. Our biggest partners we speak today are the Europeans, are the Chinese, and then you have the United States coming in a distant third. So, how do we foster more trade with the Europeans? How do we foster trade with the Chinese? That should be on our forerunner. How do we cut costs? That should be what we are discussing about. I think by the time we start putting those things in perspective, we begin to see things differently. It's not about Africa is launching with China ABC. That's not. It's about economic of scale. It's about punching the number. It's about doing what's best for you and saving yourself on due cost. A $1 billion trade, right, that you're routing through the US could end up costing you 4%. And that's almost about $400,000. You know what $400,000 can do in terms of transforming a village? It can put a school in a village, in a particular village. It could help put it can put multiple hospital primary healthcare centers in communities. So that's the way we should think about how we manage our resources. So yes, I support the. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Let's move on to our second story, where Ivory Coast has announced a new oil discovery that could boost its economy, attract investment and jobs. Um, do you think that this oil wealth would benefit its citizens, as we've seen in some oil-rich countries, as opposed to others? How can they ensure, as a country, that they maximize the benefit of their oil and not have that heavy reliance on oil and forgetting other sectors, as some countries have done? I mean, I don't want to mention Nigeria, but just so that we don't have an over-reliance or have the oil fever um replicate itself again on the African continent.
I think the simple answer is yes, but you know that the discovery will be, well, of course, but the discovery will only benefit ordinary citizen, as we all know, if the state convert those petroleum income into public services. If you convert those petroleum income into productive infrastructure, if you take those petrol income and then you put it into economic diversification, of course, people will see benefits. We all know that oil beneath the seabed itself is not yet public wealth. We have to remember that a lot of resources will have to go into that. That's important to say. And then the transmission mechanism itself for converting those oil beneath the seabed into petrodollars itself runs through commercial appraisal, contract terms, taxations. You have to come with the governance architecture around oil and gas. You have to look at how you control your expenditure control. You have to look at institutional accountability. I can go into all these things. I think there are key things here. One, it's promising, yes, but it's not yet guaranteed revenue. The fact that they discover oil, right, about 4 miles offshore, with the whole movement in the world, we don't know the direction of travel in terms of what decision. I mean, I could give you a clear, if you look closely at the trade in oil in the world today, almost 60% of the crude oil you get in the world is converted to PMS that powers cars. And we all know that cars are becoming more efficient. They are using less of PMS, and even people are pushing aggressively, especially when you go across Europe. People are pushing aggressively towards, how will I put it now, using EVs, electric cars, and then going beyond that. And that raised a lot of questions around refineries, refining capacities around the world. Most refineries are already tied down with some oil and gas deals, long-time deals, just to secure why the economy begins to transit. So the big question is that you've discovered the oil, fine, but are there commercial reasons why that oil, and it will take it because it's an offshore discovery. Is there a commercial reason why this thing should be taken out and at what cost? That's the first thing that Cote d'Ivoire will need to answer. The second thing is that whether we like it or not, the country is already expanding the petroleum sector. Remember, I think they are doing about 62 barrel. They've grown from 62 barrel, and they're also having about 75 million cubic feet of gas per day that is coming out of that country as of September. So they are not new to the oil and gas sector, right? Um, so I don't want to go deep into breaking up the architecture. We know if you understand what I'm saying, it's not been smooth sailing also for Cote d'Ivoire. They have their governance issues around the oil and gas sector. The question is that will they be able to navigate through these complex systems that they already have that is soaking out oil income through corruption, through nepotism, see the cost of governance, cost of government, or will they be able to align it for I mean, to improve the lives of their cities? That's the second question. The third question is the ownership and the fiscal terms that determine the public share. If you look at if you remember, Murphy owns almost 90% interest in the Bulali block that you're talking about. And Petro Cote d'Ivoire holds just 10%. That tells you a whole lot of story around who owns those oil blocks and what comes out at the end of the day in terms of favorable sharing. I mean, favorable contract for the people of Cote d'Ivoire. So that I don't dive deep into this. I think the takeaway here is simple and straightforward. And just like I said, Yes, the question is that can the Ivory Coast, can Cote d'Ivoire new oil discovery one way or the other truly benefit ordinary citizens? I think the short answer is yes. I've gone through the long answer, but a lot of things will have to change in the country for that to happen.
Definitely, I agree with you that a lot has to change. And just as you said, a lot of countries are moving to electric vehicles as well and beyond. Anyway, let's move to our final story. I mean, this is good news for the Nigerian security architecture, where the Senate has passed the state policing bill. This bill seeks to empower governors to be able to appoint commissioners and give directives. It also allows for state policing to operate concurrently with the existing federal policing. I mean, this has been a long time coming. There has been conversation going back and forth from different national assemblies previously. And now it has reached a stage where the Senate has passed, House of Reps as well. So this shows like the lawmakers are ready and they feel like right now is when we need state policing. Although it hasn't been finalized into law. What are your thoughts? Do you think that this is landmark for the country? And if passed, this is going to be a real massive change for the security architecture of the country, where we're going to see states being able to take hold of the security of their state. Do you think states have that capacity? How are they going to build it? What are your suggestions to state governments now that this already is in process? Should they start strategizing on how they're going to implement their state police architecture before the bill even passes, so that once it comes, they are ready to, hit the ground running as well? It will be good to hear your thoughts on this.
I think I'll call it a chicken and egg situation that we have in here. Yes, if you sit down and you unpack the Nigerian security system, there are a lot of issues. The first thing is that it's over centralized. The second thing is that it operates as if we're still in a military regime with a lot of suspicious and suspicion. And then more importantly, um, it's horrible, especially when you see the role of a governor of a state and then how that governor actually interact with the police systems that we have operating, and then vis-a-vis how that translates into security, peace within community. And that's explain why there's no state in Nigeria that is safe. That's how bad things are. So it's a welcome development if you think of it in that way, to say, okay, now you can now get people, right? Put guns in their hands, send them to the street to go and police the community. I mean, that's just how will I put it now? That's the short answer, right? That's the way it looks at. But if we begin to unpack the problem with security in Nigeria, you will discover that 99% of it have nothing to do with what do you call it now? Have nothing to do with visual, or what you call visible policing. It has to do with planning. It has to do with the way we think. It has to do with the way we actually structure the strategy we put on ground. Policing, security is completely different from defense. Defense is actually more reactive. You're waiting for something to eat you and then you react. But in policing, you're proactive. And when you say proactive, what do I mean? Proactive, preventing crime from happening. That is the whole essence. Now, if you take away the police, let's take out the police, and you ask me, what do you need as a state to police your state? You need cameras, right? To make sure you need actually to make sure that people living in your state, you know where they are living. When there are emergencies, you can respond quickly. The truth is that if you walk into any police station in Nigeria and you take in, what do you call it, a virology, right? A virologist, or I don't know what they call them, people that actually go in and then they test for virus and bacteria and contam. If you go to any police station in Nigeria, it's an eyesore. That place itself should be cordoned off. And no human being should be allowed to go near their place because it's horrible. I remember very young, I had gone to a police cell because I argued with a policeman and they threw me inside the cell. And immediately I got into the cell, you see, my body was already having blisters within 5 minutes. That's how horrible that place is. The question is that are we breeding animals? Are we putting, and people actually defecate in the cell? The whole place looks like a horrible, you know, I mean, if you go to the Romans, right, back 2,000, 3,000 years ago, they have better clean cells than what we have in Nigeria. That's one. Two, what's the role of the state attorney general in coordinating with the police to ensure that people are not kept in police stations arbitrarily? We've seen instances where somebody was shot dead. 6 years later, they're discovering his body somewhere else. So, investigation, what's the role of the attorney general in ensuring that those people that have not committed crime actually not pay for it? That's not there. So, there's resentment within the system. I mean, let me even pack that away and then go into the architecture of even policing the roads. If you look at a classical road in Nigeria, that road is a network. Millions of people go on that road. If you look closely at that road, what you will discover first is that there's no policing, there's no thinking that goes into how you manage that road. From how people break the laws on the road and all those things, there are nothing there. So my take here is that we need to unpack the Nigeria. It's not about people. It's not about employing people putting AK-47 in their hands before you police your state. That's important, but it's just one tiny bit in 1 million system. You need to ensure that CCTV cameras are integrated. You need to make sure that the information about your state, houses, and all those things are there. You need to know how to respond, the condition of your road. So, information is policing, right? You need to stream everything together. You need to put it together. You respond, helicopter, all those kind of things. I mean, if you look at Lagos, Lagos is tiny as a country. I mean, Lagos is very tiny, so that you can even have just one single police station. I mean, hypothetically, and then you can still police the whole state but when you begin to go to a Niger that you have forest, you begin to go to the Niger Delta where you have confluence of waters and all those things. How do you do policing in those places? So, my take here is that this is a good starting point, having a legal framework for state to begin to act. But really, state would have been acting even before that law come into play because they have other leeway to actually ensure that they are policing their state. But this just gives them no excuse not to do things. So let's hope that they will take this, and then by the time it becomes law, they will take this and then transform this, and then maybe we'll begin to see better policing. But unfortunately, I have my own doubts. And unfortunately, again, just to say, I can't even find one decent how will I put it? I can't find one decent state in Nigeria that you can point to and say, oh, they have a good policing, they have a good security system, and giving them access to have their own police will transform life. I don't think we have that already. And that's why everybody's giving in and then giving in to non-state actors to take up the role of the state. And then before you know it, everything will fall apart and then we'll be back to where we start from.
I know. I mean, it's upsetting when things don't work out, especially things like state policing or the policing security architecture as well. It's frustrating on the citizens because, I mean, one fundamental role of government is to ensure the protection of lives and property and ensuring security of its people. Hopefully, when the bill is able to, be passed this assembly and before next year, with the new assembly that'll be coming in. Thank you very much, Samuel, for being on the podcast today. It's such a pleasure, and it's always good to hear your thoughts on stories that are
Thank you
shaping the
always.
continent.
Yeah, thank you always for having me on the podcast. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section. We've been seeing your comments. Thank you very much for engaging with us, and we'd love to hear more. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember that you can always connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning in to the week ahead. Join us next Friday for more updates that are shaping the African continent.